Welcome to the Photo Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Savannah Dodd, and I'm the founder of the Photography Ethics Center. Each week, I'll be talking with an accomplished photographer about the ethics of their practice. Today, in episode number 8, we'll be talking with Smita Sharma about empathy in storytelling. Smita Sharma is an independent photojournalist and visual storyteller based in Delhi. Her work primarily focuses on human rights, gender, crime, and social issues. Her work has been published in various places like National Geographic Magazine, The New York Times, BBC World, Time, Channel 4, among many others. Smita has exhibited and shown her work across the globe, including at the UN headquarters in New York. She's a Getty Images grantee and an IWMF fellow. She received the One World Media Award for her short film Rebels with a Cause in the Popular Features category at BAFTA London in 2019. Other than her home country, India, she has also worked in other countries highlighting difficult and sensitive issues, such as child marriage in Nepal, teen pregnancy in Kenya, sexual slavery in the Central African Republic, and murdered transport workers of Guatemala. So thanks very much for joining me here, Smita. I was wondering if we could start just by you telling us a little bit about the kind of work that you do.
Most of my work has been on human rights, crime, social issues, and gender. And I like to work on underreported issues, things that don't appear on the surface, or things that appear on the surface, but when you dig deeper, they take a really different meaning. But having said that, I also work on assignments because they help pay the bills, and it's very difficult being an independent freelance photographer. So I do work on different things, right, from politics to daily events for the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whoever approaches me for that.
I was looking at your website and I saw a series that you had done on survivors of rape. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that series because it was so heavy-hitting. It was really powerful, but I can imagine it was a very difficult thing to shoot yourself. Like, I can imagine it took an emotional toll on you to do the work, and also that it was probably a very complicated topic to approach in the first place. So I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about how you approach that story and how you approach stories like that are so sensitive.
So the project is named Not My Shame. And from the name itself, you can understand it's the real purpose was to remove stigma, which is often, the blame and shame. It's always on the women. It's their onus, although the crime has been done by the men. So that was the main aim of for doing that project. And I started it, it's been 6 years, more than 6 years now. But that's when I started to shoot the project, But prior to that, I spent 3 years researching on this topic. I read case studies. I studied, the relevant laws. Also, some of the famous court cases on this issue. I read all that because I think it's very important for any photographer or any journalist. Before you work on something, you should know the relevant things and you should do your research well. So I like to do a lot of research before I actually go and start working on something. It was difficult to navigate, absolutely, because first of all, I was nervous. I was a woman working on this country, and I was working on some very difficult regions, particularly the northern states of India, the northern region, which is really male chauvinistic, it's difficult for women to work. People are smart. They have cell phones these days. So whenever they know that an outsider, because I'm considered as an outsider, as a city girl. So whenever they get this information that there's a city girl who's come to our village, the word goes like a wildfire. Everybody gets to know about it. And then in some situations. I was gherraud. There was a huge number of people who came asking questions and all that. But that doesn't mean that I did not, work with ethics, or I did not, follow what I was supposed to do as a journalist, because the family that I was working with, they knew why I was there, because I had already coordinated with them before I went there. And that I did through somebody who was local, somebody, I've worked with village school teachers, or a local lawyer, or somebody who lived there, and a local activist, from a nonprofit. So I always contacted them through somebody who was local, and then I went and met them. Sometimes I was accompanied by them. Sometimes, they came the first day or for just a few hours, and then they left. And then, I stayed back. And it's not that I stayed there just for a few hours. I stayed there for quite some time. Sometimes, a number of days, because I did not start asking them, how were you raped? I think that's really wrong and very insensitive. It takes time to work on something sensitive, and something which is so difficult, and you don't want to re-victimize them by asking them difficult questions. So I like to give them time, and I set it out for them to narrate what happened to them if they want to. It's their choice, because I talk to them just as a human being. I share my own stories with them. I talk to them. And Savannah, something really that touched me was, many times some of the girls, they came up to me and they said, Didi. Didi is a word for elder sister. So they would say, like, Didi, nobody ever came and spoke to us the way you did. Nobody talks to us. And that's when I felt how isolated they were, because they were ostracized, they were shamed. And this does not hold true just for India. It's a global issue. It's a global problem. Even in UK and US, women are blamed. Why were you drinking, or why did you go there, or why were you showing your cleavage? It's your fault. It's your shame.
Absolutely. So when you're sort of talking with them and working through showing their story, how do you depict them photographically? And do you involve them in that process in any way, or what does that look like, the process of actually taking the photographs then?
So, if it's a portrait, then it is a collaboration. And also, because of the sensitivity and because of the laws in India don't allow you to show or reveal the identity of the survivor. You cannot show their faces, you cannot reveal their names, and also you cannot reveal the location. So I had to be very careful as to, I didn't want their house to be recognized. Although many houses look similar, or the neighborhood can look very similar, but I didn't want to take that risk. So definitely, all the portraits have been a collaborative process, and I had to ask them, "Can you stand this way? Can you look in that direction? Can you move your face away from the light?" And I used a lot of lighting, and the kind of lights that I use are really tiny lights, because I travel to the villages. I don't want to come across as a photographer, because I don't want to draw attention to myself, and I don't want to bring any kind of danger to myself. I'm a woman, right? What if something happens? Who's going to come and rescue me? Or how am I going to get out of that situation? And also, I didn't want to put the family at risk. I didn't want people to know why I was going to their houses. So, I developed a technique, and which I do even today. In certain these kind of situations where a family, there's a girl who's a survivor of a sexual crime, and I'm going to meet her. I go around walking in the village, and I tell people that I'm doing research on female hygiene. And then I take random photographs of other people also. I don't directly go to that girl's house. So the moment I start talking about menstrual hygiene, you won't believe it. The men just leave me alone. They are so embarrassed, and and that's how I do my work. Once they leave me alone, I start talking, and people are really curious. They want to know why you are there. So once their curiosity has died down, they're bored of seeing me, and they know, like, okay, she's here for this reason. Okay, she's carrying a sanitary napkin and she's giving it to some girls. So once they're done with all that, then I start doing my real job. I go, I spend time with the family, and sometimes it's the survivor's family, sometimes it's the victim's family. And I say victim because sometimes the girls don't survive, they are murdered. I've been to their houses, I've met their parents, and I have interviewed them. I have documented their lives.
I think that's such a good idea to not draw attention to the family. I read about that actually in your interview with Robert Godden in the volume that I edited called Ethics and Integrity in Visual Research Methods. And I was planning on asking you about that. So I'm glad you brought it up. And that whole process that you're describing is so time intensive. And I think that time is something that comes up a lot in conversations that I have with photographers about how much time it takes to have an ethical process and to do things ethically and to lay the groundwork and do the research. And I think that's really coming through in these stories that you're telling. And I wonder, to what extent are you able to have the time that you need when you're doing commissioned work, or is that sort of a whole nother beast?
So it all depends on the clients that you're working for. I just recently concluded my work with National Geographic magazine, and this was a story on child sex trafficking, and which was cross-border. It was between India and Bangladesh. So this was a project that I started on my own 5 years ago, and I had done a lot of research as usual, and then I started working on it and developing my network and access with the police, with the bureaucracy, with the anti-human trafficking unit, and various law enforcement agencies, apart from the survivors and the shelters where the rescued girls are kept. So when I approached Nat Geo, they saw the work that I had created, and then the story was approved by them, and then they asked me to start everything from scratch. But I was on a very good position because of my already done access that I had. I knew people, so it was easy. It wasn't easy as in easy, but it was easier, I would say, because I'd done my homework.
Why did why did they ask you to start it from scratch? What was it that was different the second time around?
So it was not different. It was, I think, a continuation of what I had done. It's just, the policy of Nat Geo is that you have to, if you're on assignment by them, they will, you have to shoot for them, and everything has to be, from the start. It's, I mean, there was one photograph that I had shot before, and it was a very important photograph that I had taken of a criminal inside a police station, and which is rare. It might not be rare in other countries, but in India, it's rare to get that kind of access, interviewing a criminal who was inside police custody. So that photograph was later licensed by Nat Geo for the story.
This reminds me of something that you said about how, and I didn't know this, that in India it's required by law to protect the identity of survivors of rape and sexual assault. And that's so interesting in so many ways, but it reminds me of a conversation that I had previously with another photographer, and we were talking about the risk of being paternalistic in terms of if there's a situation where a woman is a survivor of rape and she actually wants to own her story. How complicated that can be if we say, well, you can't be identified or associated with your story. You can't own your story in that way, and you have to be anonymized. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you view that and how that comes out in your work.
I think it's a very interesting question, and I'm not against the idea of a survivor wanting to come and share her story and show her face if she wants to. It's absolutely her call, because some people are really brave enough to come out in the front, and even in India, there have been women who have come out in the front in the past. But the relevant law is called POCSO, which is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. So this particular act was done to protect the children, to protect minors. I think there's nothing wrong in it, because children, they are traumatized, and whether they can take a decision that they want to come out and talk about, because you don't know how the future is going to unfold for them. And in countries like India or in any country in Asia, there's a lot of shaming that I had mentioned before. So, the prospect of getting a job, the prospect of getting married or having a boyfriend, everything can be affected. So this was the reason why this law was made. And the law does, I mean, it's not that anybody who is above 18 cannot come out in the open or talk about it. No, I have met people, I have met survivors. I have interviewed two survivors who were adults, and they said, I want to show my face because I don't think I've done anything wrong. Why should I be ashamed?
Absolutely. So that law then applies specifically to minors.
Yes. For adults, it applies only if they consent to you to to allow them to be revealed, reveal their faces, reveal their identity, their names, and everything. There might be some people who might say that you have to change my name, but I don't mind showing my face if you photograph me in a certain way. That has happened to me. In some situations, a girl, I mean, she was 23 and she said, like, if it does not come in Facebook, I don't mind. You can publish the work. So different people have different priorities, they have different reservations.
That resonates with me so much because something that I often talk with people about when I'm helping organizations or individuals develop consent forms is about sort of the importance of giving people those options, because people do have preferences. How do you do that, and how do you implement that in your work? Because I've heard a lot of people say, oh yeah, that's like a great idea, but how do we actually do that, and I think that becomes a little bit of a barrier to the conversation about giving people more autonomy over their image.
I think it's all about informed consent, and this is a huge topic that Robert and me have discussed, and also we have discussed this in the book, the chapter that he's written for the book that you have published. So you need to inform the people that you're photographing, why you are there, what is going to happen to the images, how is it going to be printed, in which region or country, is it going to be translated, is it going to be made public in that particular region, in that particular country. Because sometimes some people say that if it comes in foreign publications, I don't care. But if it publishes in India, then there is a problem. In some people, they don't even care if it publishes in the country, but then they tell me that it should not be published in this particular state or in this particular language. Then it's okay. And then, as I told you, some people, because the youth especially, they use a lot of social media. So they are scared. They don't want their particular images or story to be shared on social media sometimes. And then they also ask me, is it going to be there? And before they ask me, I tell them that it could be, because for that Nat Geo story, which I was doing, I told them that this will be available on Instagram, on Facebook, and this is how it's going to be published, or there is a possibility of it being published in this particular way. So then they would tell me, okay, so you can take my photograph, but you can do this or you can do that, or I just want to mention this incident and about a particular assignment that I did for Human Rights Watch. This was a few years ago. I did this in Central African Republic. So we were a team with a videographer and a researcher. This project was about documenting women who were kept as former sex slaves and who were used as a weapon of war, where rape was used as a weapon of war. While we were working on it, the researcher was very uncomfortable with us interviewing or photographing them, and she wanted us to do everything in a silhouette. And as an artist, a silhouette is what, black and white. It says nothing, and for me, it's very important to show the person's personality. I want to know how something about her. Even if you don't show the face, there are different things that you can show that tells us a lot about the person, the body language, the way she's looking up or she's sitting. And so I tried to explain, and she said, the women are so poor, sometimes they just have one or two set of clothes, and I don't want them to be identified. So I had to think of a solution. What can we do? So I came up with a solution. I spoke about this too with my colleague Zoe, and I said, what if we send our local producer to the market And what if he goes and buys some fabrics? So we sent him, and we asked him to get some safety pins and some fabrics, and he came back with a pile of clothes. Some of them were translucent, because I had asked him to get some translucent, and some of them were just normal clothes, normal cloth fabric. So we dressed the women with those new fabric, and in some of the places that we photographed, I used the translucent material to have a layer in between me and the person. It was an additional layer. So it also acted as a very nice, it gave a very nice artistic look. And then they were wearing different set of clothes. And of course, I did a lot of lighting, which I usually do. So I think Human Rights Watch was very happy with this work, and you know, my editor called me and she said, like, I'm really happy that you came out with this solution, and the photographs are really powerful. So we did. At the end, it worked out, and we were happy that it created the impact that we wanted.
Absolutely. I think that brings up such an important point, that identifiability isn't only somebody's face. I think that that's a brilliant example about how if somebody only has two sets of clothes, that is very, very identifiable, even if you photograph just their bottom half, or just their back. Out of curiosity, I'd like to know what happened to the cloth at the end of the photo shoot.
So we gave it to them. We gave it to all of them. So the fabric that we gave them, it was not the same fabric that we photographed them, because what if they wore it? We had to be careful with that. So we gave them a different fabric. We gave them a new fabric, but a different one.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. And when you're talking about sort of giving people options about how their photographs are used. So if you're doing a story and someone says, right, totally fine with it going anywhere except for Instagram, what happens when that sort of limitation is set and you're working for an organization like Nat Geo? How do you transfer that information to the organization? And does the organization always respect that? Or how do you ensure that the organization treats that with integrity?
I've been very lucky to have worked with very good editors who are wonderful human beings. And at the end of the day, we are all human. You have to understand, no matter who is working at what position. I think the person that we photograph, that person does us a favor by sharing their story. We are not doing a favor, they are doing a favor to us. So we have to respect that, and that is really important. And it has never happened to me that I came back with something that was rejected by the editor. It never happened. Even in this Nat Geo assignment, there were many things that came up. It was, hell lot of issues that we had to resolve, because it was such a sensitive issue. It was risky, and there were so many things. Like one of the girl, she was a major, and she said you can use her name. But at the end of the day, when we went through all our, we had to scrutinize all the information that we had, and our researcher, she was, verifying the information. And then we all thought that I don't think it was important. I mean, it might just put her into some kind of danger. And she used to work in a particular factory, and I had it in the caption. And suddenly I remembered that I should not mention that she's working in a particular type of factory, because if we happen to disclose the location, it wouldn't be very difficult to find out that how many factories produce these kind of products, and then someone can just locate her. So there are so many things that you have to be very aware of and careful about. And as you asked, has there been any situation? If there is a situation, I talk it very honestly with the editor. There's always, it's all about problem solving at the end of the day.
And in terms of when you're getting informed consent from an individual and you're talking with them about where the photograph is going and how it might be used and what potential risks are, something I'm often asked is how do you, if you're working with people who don't have reliable access to the internet or who have never engaged with social media, how do you make that understandable to people, and how can they give consent for something if they've not ever used the platform? How do you approach that in your work?
So I show them the platforms. Like, look, this is the Instagram, and this is how I share my stories. And if it's a particular publication that I'm going for, I show the publication's Instagram or social media or Facebook, any social media, and I tell them that it is going to be shown in this way. You have a phone with you all the time. It's not so difficult to open it up and show it to people.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. Very good. Is there anything that sort of now you're, many years into your professional practice, is there anything that you really wish that you had known back when you started as a photojournalist?
Well, I think I started my profession a bit later, not in my early 20s. But I started photography very early when I was 18, and then I was self-taught. And when I wanted to work, as a documentary photographer, as a photojournalist, I did not have many options, or I did not have a mentor, or I did not have much information. I didn't know how to do it. So I worked on many things, right from advertising to event management. Then I took a break. I studied again. I did my post-graduation in journalism. And then I joined a newspaper, a national English daily. And I worked there as a correspondent and as a sub-editor for 6 years, which I did not enjoy a lot, but I was working at the desk. And that's when I realized that this is not meant for me. I'm meant to go out. I'm meant to do other things. And I always loved the visual medium. I knew it was photography because photography was my first love. And I always did photography. Even when I was working, I would go on travel, I would take my camera, and I would always share stories, and I would always meet different people. And camera is a big excuse to meet different people and talk to them. It's a very beautiful thing. Well, I think this is what I would say. Maybe had I started earlier, things would have been different, or maybe I would have done a lot of work. But we all have our own timelines and destiny. No one can change it, and I don't think any experience goes for a waste. Even my work that I did as a journalist, I think it's come very handy even now, because I know how to navigate through things. Difficult things, because I already had that kind of experience working as a correspondent. Yeah.
Absolutely. What would you say is sort of the one or two main skills that you've brought from your experience as a journalist, and you use that in your work in photography today?
I think managing difficult situation, keeping calm and managing difficult situation. Sometimes people get violent, sometimes you're surrounded by a mob, sometimes a lot of things, people might not want you there. So how do you diffuse a certain situation and come out of it?
Absolutely. And yeah, you talked a lot about safety, and I definitely think that safety is an ethical issue as well, because whether we're putting ourselves in danger, putting others in danger, or who might have to be put in danger to save us if we get in a dangerous situation, So what kinds of steps do you take in your work to ensure your safety and the safety of others?
Well, as I mentioned before, in certain situation, if I think I'm going to single out a particular family, I go and talk to other people, as I mentioned before. I don't go there as a photojournalist. I don't carry a lot of gear. In fact, sometimes I don't even carry a camera bag. I have a really weird, ugly-looking bag, kind of like a tote bag. And I have this camera bag where it has a detachable chamber. So I can put my, the lenses and the camera bodies, and then I can take this whole thing out and I can put it in that other tote bag. So if you look at me, it doesn't look like a camera bag. And I also don't carry a lot of gear. I work in a very minimalistic way. I know a lot of people carry 3, four lenses. They have a hell lot of things, but I don't. I use very, very smaller things. The lights are really tiny. Sometimes I don't even carry a tripod because it's not possible. And I use a lot of things which are available on location. For example, if I'm sitting in someone's house and I need to place a light, I can't find anything, then I'll look for something which is available, like sometimes a furniture, and then I'll keep some vessel, and then I'll put that light on top of that vessel. I create, it's like all about how creative you become when you are left with nothing. So that's what I do. And the other thing is about when you're traveling. So when traveling, it's very important to get a good driver. Do a lot of background check of the region that you're going, which is the good time to go to that region, which is the time to avoid going in certain places. I think it's very important to learn on that. And also, how do you blend in? If I'm working in Bangladesh, which is a largely Islamic country, I am going to wear a certain set of clothes and cover my arms. And, not everybody wears a hijab, but if it's required, then I will wear it. So it all depends on which country I'm working in, and how do I have to tackle that particular situation.
And is there any advice that you would give to someone who wants to pursue a career similar to yours?
I get some emails from young photographers or emerging, or those who want to pursue photojournalism as a career. And many times I have been asked, can we join you? I want to go with you. You go to such exotic locations and your images are so great. What I find is that, they live with a bubble in their eye. They don't realize how hard our profession is, how difficult it is to sustain. There are so many things to it. First of all, if you're working independently as a freelancer, you'll have to make ends meet. You need to pay your bills. So how do you make that money? That is the first important thing. Secondly, it is not at all a glamorous profession. A lot of people think, oh, a woman with a camera, oh wow. But it is absolutely no. It is, when you have to carry tons of gear, and when you have to walk just to reach a particular place. Like I have walked, there were certain places where the cars couldn't go. You have to leave it and you have to keep walking in the hot sun, walking 3-4 kilometers to reach, just to meet somebody, and then, start your work. It's not easy. It's certainly not an easy profession. And another thing, and this is an advice that I really want to tell young photographers, that don't be in a hurry to get recognition, to get your work published. Because I see a lot of people, they want to take up work because it's the hot topic. When the Me Too movement was happening, a lot of people wanted to work on women and sexual violence issues, okay? Not because they really cared, and I'm not ruling out the fact that they don't care, but I don't know how invested can one be in something that you don't really care about, because at some point you're going to get bored of it. So I think you should only invest your energy into something that you really like, that you really care about, and then you should follow it. And if your work is good, eventually, your work will get published, your work will get recognition. If you really do it honestly, things happen. It's just a matter of time when it happens, and we all have our own timelines, as I said.
Well, I think you're such a good testament to that as well, that how many years were you working on the story before it was picked up by Nat Geo? Like
3 years.
Yeah. Like that's a long time to invest in something with no confidence that it will be taken forward on the other side. So absolutely.
And not just that, I got rejected by all the grants that I had applied to for this work. All of them. I think I applied to at least 15 grants and I got rejected by all 15.
Wow. That, it just goes to show, doesn't it? But, so many people have said something along those similar lines, that like young photographers should not be chasing like you said, the hot topic, but following what interests them. Because I think that there's so much rejection anyway, as it is, and if you don't love it, you probably won't stick with it through all that.
Absolutely. And it's great, you should get a grant, or you should be able to finance yourself. Sometimes it's very difficult to sustain yourself when you're working on something. And for me, what I did was I did assignments. I got paid for it, and I used that money to help in my own personal project that I wanted. So there are different ways that one can work. Some people work for corporate events, some people work for weddings as a wedding photographer. It doesn't matter where you work, and no work is lesser or demeaning. It's just how you figure things out yourself.
One thing that I want to ask all of our podcast guests is, what does photography ethics mean to you?
It's difficult to say one word or sentence about it, but I think photojournalism cannot sustain itself without having ethics as a backbone. And I call it a backbone because you cannot create things which are not real. You cannot distort facts. You cannot stage scenes. You cannot do that. Then it's not what you are meant to be. I think ethics has been very important to me from the very beginning. And, I have come across certain photographers who have worked unethically. I have faced some photographers and I've asked them questions as to why are you doing this? It was not my business to do it, but I thought it is important because for our industry, because if somebody does wrong, then our whole industry gets the bad name. And if somebody is working unethically or using unethical means, and if this is affecting people, then it's not good for any of us to be working in the field, because people will lose trust in journalists or in us. So when you go to them, they said, okay, we have been cheated earlier and we don't want to work with you. And this has happened to me, trust me, it has happened to me. So I think it's very important for the entire industry to be transparent and work with honesty.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Photo Ethics Podcast. The aim of this podcast is to share new insights about photography ethics with others. So, if you heard something you liked, please share this podcast with someone who would appreciate it. The links to all things mentioned in this episode number 8 are available in the show notes at www.photoethics.org. Join me next week when we hear from Justin Carey on solitude and collaboration. If you're enjoying this podcast, why don't you check out our online courses? We've developed a series of 3 online courses designed specifically for photojournalists and documentary photographers. We discuss questions like, how do we achieve accuracy in our photographs? What's the relationship between power and consent? And when, if ever, should we intervene? These online courses come with perks, like access to an online community group for discussion, and Q&A opportunities with me, the course leader. Enroll today at www.photoethics.thinkific.com or go to www.photoethics.org and click Online Courses.